All right, in this video, we're going to divide decimals. To divide, you move the decimal point on the divisor all the way to the right until it's a whole number. Then you move the decimal point in the dividend to the right the same number of places. You divide. And then you place the decimal point in the quotient right above the moved decimal point in the dividend. Now that's the directions. I have to read them to you. Let me show you what that's talking about. I am dividing 517.2 by 6. That means that the decimal is going to go right there. Since the 6 is already a whole number, we don't need to move the decimal. So let's get started. 6 doesn't divide into 5, but it does divide into 51. 6 divides into 51 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. We subtract, we get a 3. I'm going to bring the rest of the number down. 6 times 37, 6 doesn't go into 3, but it does go into 37 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36, and we subtract. We get a 1, and again, bring the rest of the number down. 6 divides into 12 2 times. Multiply and subtract. So my answer is 86.2. Let's do it again. Now on this one, because we have a negative divided by a negative, the answer is going to be positive. So you don't actually have to use those to divide. So let's go ahead and divide the 48 into the 34.08. Decimal point's going to go right there. Now, 48 doesn't divide into 3. It doesn't even divide into 34. So I'm actually going to divide it into this 340. It goes 7 times. You can play with it in the margin like we showed you in class before. 7 times 8 is 56. Carry the 5. 7 times 4 is 28. Plus 3 more is 33. Then we subtract. I need to borrow. So that's going to leave me a 3. That'll make that a 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. That's 0. That's 0. Bring down the rest of the number. 48 goes into 48 one time. 1 times 48 is 48, and we subtract. And there's our answer. Let's continue. Now we get to see what they meant by moving the decimal to the end of the divisor. Now, I'm going to go ahead and write down the fact that I'm going to get a negative answer, because a positive divided by a negative is going to give me a negative. So if I start off with 5.6 divided into that divisor, I want to go ahead and move the decimal on the divisor over to the end. He needs to be at the end of the number. But if you do it to the bottom of the number, you're going to have to do it to the top of the division. You can do it there, or you can have written it. Let me erase. You can do it there, or you can do it here. I'm going to divide 5.6 into 166.88. And again, then you stop and you're like, I can't divide by anything with a decimal, so I've got to move the decimal to the end of that number. Now he's there. That's what I want. But anything that you do to the divisor, you have to do to the dividend inside. So you're going to move it over 1 as well. So now here's what you're actually dividing. You're going to divide 56, now that you made them into a whole number, into 1668.8. Let's do it. 56 doesn't go into 1, it doesn't go into 16, but it does go into 166. It goes in 2 times. Oh, by the way, the decimal is going to be right there. 2 times 156 is 112. And we subtract. That leaves me with a 4, a 5, a 0. Bring down the rest of the number. 56 doesn't go into 54, but it does go into 548. 56 goes into 548 9 times. 9 times 6 is 54. And 9 times 5 is 45, plus 5 more is 50. And I subtract. 8 minus 4 is 4. 4 minus 0 is 4, and I bring down the rest of the number. 56 goes into 448 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 5 is 40 plus 4 is 44. And we subtract. And there's our answer. But we know it's negative because we figured that out ahead of time. Let's try it again with this guy. If I'm dividing 0.16 into 1.976, I need to move the decimal point 2 to the right because I must make him a whole number. But anything I do to the number on the outside, I'm going to have to do to the number on the inside. Here's where my new decimal point goes. So let's rewrite it. This is now going to be 16 divided into 197.6. Here's where the answer's decimal point will go. 16 doesn't go into 1, but it does go into 19 one time. 1 times 16 is 16, and we subtract. I'm going to end up with a 3. I'm going to bring the rest of the number down. 16 doesn't go into 3, but it does go into 37. It goes into it 2 times. 2 times 16 will be 32, and we subtract. That's going to be 5, and you bring down the rest of the number. 16, doesn't go into 50. Doesn't go into 5, but it does go into 56. 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. Carry the 1. That's going to make it a 48. Subtract. I'm going to need to borrow. So I get 8. I only have one decimal point and I have 8. I'm going to add another 0. You're always allowed to do that depending on how many decimal points they want your answer to have. But I'm going to add another 0. You can always add. And because I happen to know 16 goes into 80 5 times. 5 times 6 is 30. And then 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 more is 8. Done. And my answer, positive divided by a positive, is a positive 12.35. We'll see that adding a 0 at the end again in just a little bit. Let's continue though. Now, there are these things called terminating and non-terminating decimals. If you do a division and the decimal stops on its own, it's called terminating. That's like you get a remainder of 0. So examples of numbers that are terminating, they give you some here, but here's some more. If you have 1/2, well, that's a 0.5, isn't it? Or 1/4, that's 0.25. And it stops on its own. That's a terminating decimal. When you have something like 1/3, or in this case 4/3, where it continues and it doesn't ever stop, a repeating decimal is called a non-terminating decimal. If you have a number that repeats digits over and over again, it's called a repeating decimal. A repetend is the repeating digit, the part that repeats. And a bar is placed over the repetend, or repeatend. I don't know how to say that word. Let's look for, and on these, they want us to round it to the nearest hundredth. So that means we've got to keep 3 decimals so we can round to the hundredths place. So let's do it. I'm going to divide 0.57 into 23.4. But I'm going to need to move my decimal place 2 places to the right to get it a whole number on the outside, which means the inside will also have to be moved 2 places. Here's my new decimal point. I'll need a placeholder. So I'm going to end up dividing 57 into 2340. And here's where my decimal place goes. 57 doesn't go into 2 or 3, but it does go into 234. So 57 goes into 234 4 times. For time's sake, 4 times 57 is 228. And I can subtract. I'm going to end up having to borrow, and I'll bring the rest of the number down. 57 goes into 60 one time. Subtract, and I'm going to need some more. So I'm going to add another 0. That's not enough. I'm going to add another 0. Now, it didn't go into it here, so I'm going to end up having to place a 0 here because it didn't divide into that 0 either. It divides all the way into that position. So we're going to get into the hundredths spot now. 57 goes into that 5 times. 5 times 57 is 285. And I subtract. That gives me 15 after I borrow. Okay, I'm going to need another 0 because I need 3 decimal places in order to be able to round to the hundredth spot. 57 goes into 150 twice. 2 times 7 is 14. Carry that. 2 times 5 is 10 plus 1 is 11. When I subtract, let's see, borrow, I get 36. It doesn't go into it anymore, but now I have to round. Since I'm trying to round this to this position, I'm going to look at the number right after it. Because it's not bigger than 5, remember the rule, my answer will be 41.05. And I think we can quickly do this last one. Let's see, if I have 0.9 divided into 0.02, in order to get the decimal to the end of the 0.9, I've got to move it over 1, which means I'll have to move this one over 1. So I've got 9 divided into 2. I know I'm going to end up needing a few decimal places, in fact, 3 of them. If you're going to be rounded to the hundredths, you give yourself one more. So let's see here. 9 doesn't divide into 2, but it divides into 20 twice, and I get 18. Subtract. That's going to give me a 2. Bring down the rest of the number. 9 goes into 20 twice. 18. Subtract. And I get 2. 9 goes into 20. Do you see something happening here? The 2 is repeating over and over again, isn't it, as a difference. So I'm going to get that as a repeating decimal. But because I'm rounding it to the hundredths, here's where I want to round it to. Look at the number behind it. Because he's smaller than 5, my final answer will be 0.22. Oh, that was right here, wasn't it? Oh, I'm going to have to redo this one in the next video. I apologize. We'll start that on the next video.